Easy now, fuzzy little man Peach. You ever drunk Baileys from a shoe? I'm gonna hurt you.
The reason we haven't posted a video of old Greg's undercarriage yet is because without passing a shakedown, we didn't know what was gonna work and what wasn't. So now that we've run it through some whoops, we've jumped it, we've broke it a couple times, we can effectively tell you what worked, what didn't, and what repairs we need to make before we can keep going. Get Isabel off the lift real quick and bring Greg in. The car has a lot of haphazard fab work because we built most of it in about 2.5 weeks trying to get ready for an event at SEMA Fest with Hoonigan. Before we go up too high, here's a quick walk around. We've got a 14 bolt in the rear with some Chevy 63-inch springs. Motor and trans, we have just a stock 5.3, no turbos. The forward-facing headers, a lot of people think it has turbos. We just have the infrastructure for turbos. And then this is an LS7 intake off a Z06 Corvette. Front bumper is just a bumper kit for a circle track car. We've got some 16-inch coilovers. We've got some rough country bump stops. Beams are two driver's side beams from a 90s F250. For the transmission, we have a T56 6-speed, and that's half of a CR250 handlebar. As far as the LS swap goes, I feel like the LS actually fits in here better than the stock 4.6 did. The 4.6 is considerably wider, and this thing sits in here just perfect. Now, this is a 93, so the 93 didn't have electric fans, but this radiator and fan setup are out of an 05, and it, with little modification, dropped right in. I know this looks super stupid, but we actually have the fan relay triggered off of the LS PCM. We are also running the stock fuel pump relay off of the LS PCM. We just had to change it from a power signal to a ground signal. The engine cage is 1.5-inch DOM, and it comes in from the top of the frame rail right there, and then to the side over here. And then we've got a tie-in up top, and then we had to do these little braces right here because these tabs were a little bit long. Before we had bump stops on this thing, we bottomed out really hard and bent the tabs. If I missed something, let me know. Honestly, there's a lot to go over. I have a truck steering gear. It bolts into the same 3-bolt pattern as the Crown Vic, but it has a forward pitman arm. It's a 3-inch drop pitman arm. The swing set steering is just a rough draft to make sure geometry is okay. It has its problems. The beams themselves are out of a 90s vintage F250, and it's 2 driver's side beams, and that's why they're equal length. The problem with that, though, is that when you put a driver's side beam on the passenger side, its caster correction is facing the opposite direction. You can see right there that the beam is actually laid forward when it should be laid back, and this is a big problem. I'm going to end up cutting and turning these beams, so it won't be too big of a deal for me because I'm just going to use the ends, but for someone else, you can't run that well. From what I understand, the E350 beams don't have that same caster correction. I was going to use a set of those, but I only had one, and it didn't match the length of my other one. For right now on the steering, we just have the stock tie rods that we had chopped up and then sleeved inside some DOM. These swingers are just a 3x3 box tube, but the problem is this mount is too narrow and we have a lot of steering deflection. I'll see if I can pull on the wheel. And what steering deflection is since that mount can shift side to side, it allows there to be some numbness and slop in the middle. The brake line setup that we've done, we came into the center of the beams and then did 2 soft lines that wrap down, and then that goes to another soft line right there. Having it behind the beam helps protect the lines, and you don't have as much hanging down on the sides that can get caught on stuff. This is the stock truck oil pan on the 5.3, and we've got a little bit of clearance all the way around. And then the T56 sits in the tunnel okay. We ended up mounting motor and trans at 5 degrees back, and that was partially to help us with the pinion angle. But at 5 degrees back, we didn't have to do any trans tunnel modifications. The radius arm mounts are on the cross member that we built, and that's just welded straight to the frame. In the future, we're gonna cut some notches out, and we're still gonna box this. This isn't all done yet. These radius arms were actually from Marketplace. We didn't build these, but they are pretty stout. And then those coilover mounts, a lot of people have said that those are gonna snap off as soon as we take it off-road. Honestly, it's not ideal, but we've jumped them a number of times and we don't see any signs of fatigue. Moving towards the back, we've got our leaf spring set up. And this is just a Chevy 63 install kit from Rough Stuff Specialties. And then these plates are just plates that we had cut out and made so that we could land those perches just outside the frame. And then those back perch mounts are welded straight to the frame. The rear axle in it right now is a 10.5-inch 14 bolt out of a 2001 Chevy 2500. It's welded up and has 538 gears. We've got the shocks set up pretty slacked out on this, and that was for a number of reasons that I'm not going to go into right now, and we can argue about that, but they don't work great. I was supposed to get rear bump stops done before we went out and jumped this, but I didn't, so we snapped a leaf spring. I know it's silly, but here's one of my favorite parts of the whole build, is that we've got the exhaust going through the original coil bucket. And we just got that little kick out right there. The reservoir is mounted on the side of the car. Originally started as a joke. One of my buddies was like, wouldn't it be silly if we had it out here? And then I was like, oh, that's a great idea. The name Old Greg comes from a Mighty Boosh skit.
Hi there, I'm Old Greg. Pleased to meet you.
And he's a scaly manfish.
Here comes Old Greg. He's a scaly manfish.
Sea monster who's just ridiculous.
It's attached to your rod, mother liquor.
And absurd.
You ever drunk Baileys from a shoe?
And that's kind of what this car is. It's really not meant to be a competitive car. It's just a toy. I know some people are like, oh, you're never going to be able to get max performance out of that, but I just try to remind them, yeah, it's a Crown Vic. And this is quite literally the Crown Vic that my grandma drove me to church in when I was a kid. And now it's out just in the desert having fun. The things that we need to do before we can jump it some more, we need to do rear bump stops. We need to swap out the rear leafs. I really would love to do some Deaver long travels and do a spring under. I'm going to do a traction bar setup in the rear as well. I need to fix the caster issues in the front. I need to make the mount points on the swingers wider and overall just start tuning stuff in. Those rear shocks, we do need to do something different there. I'm going to try a stiffer shock in there. If that doesn't work, then I'm going to have to go more lateral with the shocks. And that's pretty much it. It's a real simple setup. It does really well. It does better than it should. It's a joke that actually kind of works. Once we get it sorted out, it'll be a little bit better. But honestly, it's not going to be a competitive car. It's just a play toy. Originally going to take this car to LS Fest, but that is next week and the car's broken, so I doubt it makes it. Rough draft on the car, so if you want to watch it get sillier and get better, you can follow along.